Damn, I'm live. Yes. Alright, y'all. So I'm just going to design. I got some stuff I got in my head that I'm trying to get down. So I'm gonna do some designing stuff and watch some videos as I design, do my normal process. Just want y'all to see what I'm doing, how I do it, and the stuff that I'm into, the stuff that I watch on YouTube. So enjoy. Hope y'all like it. Hope everybody watch the video or whatever. But yeah, I'm gonna get to some design shit. I'm just working on some stuff, just some ideas I'm trying to get out. So I'm gonna just get right into it. Let's get it. Alright. They're mainly for my brand Temple, so yeah, you can expect that. But anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and get my day started. I gotta get caught up on some stuff and see what's going on. I'm a gamer. I like gaming stuff. I like anime. I like a whole bunch of stuff. So the videos I'm gonna play, maybe gaming, fashion, all that other stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna just get right into it, just design, and whoever join. So let's get right into it. All right, got that. Everything uppercase. There we go. And this is Gothicus for the font type, if y'all interested in knowing. All right, what I'm about to do, I'm gonna do like a blending option or whatever, and y'all gonna see like this dope effect that I'm trying to pull off. All right, I just need two, stack them on top. I think make this one white. Hold on. I don't even know if anybody watching. Hold up. Oh shit, I'm showing y'all my shit. Oh my god. How do I put up the chat in this shit? Hold on. I don't know. Fuck it. Okay. Hold on, y'all. All right. I gotta bring my damn phone up so I can see the damn chat. So yeah, I gotta deal with it. Sorry, but let's get it. From the watch some couple of videos or whatever, see what's going on. All right, I gotta get caught up on my gaming stuff, so we finna jump into the gaming while I design. So I'm gonna pull the screen up for y'all. Boom, and boom. Here we go.
But I do want to say, it's probably
all right. Before I start, this is a game called Ashes of Creation. It's an MMORPG. I've been following this shit for a while. So yeah, I'm just getting caught up on the news that dropped yesterday about this game because there's a lot of dope shit coming out. So enjoy.
Have underwear with my face on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw in a couple videos there was underwear with my face. I'm like, what is this? Yeah, probably not the best idea, but either way, yeah, do love it.
Bruh, his videos be on point. I ain't gonna even hold you.
I thought we had something special. How could you say this, Stephen? I thought, but I've already.
Oh, I'm gonna put it on that later.
I've already taken it to the next.
Bruh, they need to be doing
the Zoomers won and Ashes of
progress involving the combat, and I'm excited to break all of that down for you today.
Come on.
But before we get into that, our patrons and I would love for you to grab yourself a Cooper Cola because
I'm a nerd, y'all. Get used to it.
Is our dish of the
I am
day,
a nerd.
paired with a side of ranged combat and a few interesting concepts and race reveals to wash it all down with. So strap yourselves in, my friends. We've got a doozy this month. Now, with all that bollocks out of the way, let's begin, shall we? I'll speed run through the start
That
as
ain't what I
usual because
wanted.
it's pretty much the same as every month, but still a little too much to just skip entirely. We had the comment of the day, the monthly pack stopover,
Excuse
and
me.
not too much to catch up on involving the studio. They're continuing
what
to
I
make
want.
progress, but it is still not quite ready to show. However, they did reminisce a little about the development over the years and teased some future videos that would take us through the years of development as certain aspects evolved. So I'm really looking forward to monetizing that for my own channel in the future. Additionally, we had the announcement
that's what I
of the
fucked up.
AMA coming up next month. We have in fact set up a channel in our Discord collecting
There we
everyone's
go.
questions, and we'll be filtering through them later this month, so why not come and drop your question there as well, because you never know, there may already be an answer and we will be answering them for you in our community event. This upcoming AMA
Okay, I
is
see, I fucked
rather
up there.
exciting, and it's also another free video for me to monetize so I can purchase a bunch of pointless and unnecessarily revealing costumes for my videos in the future. Now, with them formalities out of the way, because it wouldn't be a narc video without at least 3 minutes of wasting everyone's time, let's jump into the meat of today's massive reveal.
I am a straight geek.
As
Get
promised,
used
we're
to
going to
it.
jump straight into the Ranger reveal and ranged combat
why this shit
demonstration,
ain't
as well as
working?
a little sneak peek at an enemy faction race, the Minotaurs, and a first look at the user interface. We also got an interesting tease at some cool future content to look forward to in the form of this ominous looking tower in the distance that we will be able to explore for the launch of Alpha 2. Pretty exciting stuff, but inconsequential compared to what was revealed today, because for the first time this project was kickstarted in 2018. This MMORPG is finally starting to
This shit is
feel
not
like
blending
a
how I
true
want. This shit is
playable
irritating me.
reality. But before we dive in, I just
Swap it
genuinely
around.
want to express how pleased I was with the reveal today. I knew Steven and the T would make the correct choices when it
fuck?
comes to combat. Due
What
to
did
their
I do
past
last time? I
choices
did something
involving
last time to
world
make this shit
design,
work.
mechanics and systems, but
And it ain't
this
working
live stream
now.
today has pretty much solidified Ashes of Creation's
Hold
success
up.
for me and likely for everyone who
Oh,
was
Lord.
watching. The showcase was showing a female Empyrean wielding 2 arranged weapons,
There we
the
go.
longbow and shortbow, alongside 3 of the ranger abilities. I will go over these in a moment, as well as giving you my brief opinions before shilling my follow-up video in a couple of days. As you can see, this showcase took part in a new location in the Riverlands within the spring season early in the morning. The dew floating close to the ground and the subtle butterflies were a really nice aesthetic touch that genuinely gave off the exact vibe
That's it?
that
I think
Steven
that's it.
described here. So bravo on that. It's great to see that you're utilizing the seasonal tech to give atmosphere to certain locations in the context of the time of day. There were a few key parts of this demonstration I wanted to point out, as well as highlighting those abilities used. So let's start with these. I'm pleased to say the combat continues to follow the hybrid style we've seen since the Alpha 1 and during the Melee showcase, which really hits that perfect medium of tab targeting fundamentals an MMORPG needs to be genuinely challenging, teamwork based and fun, whilst loosening up the
Damn, what
shallow
the hell did I
restrictive
do?
mechanics that people tend to berate tab targeting for. And if I'm honest,
It ain't coming out how I
tend to
did the other
agree
day.
with
This shit
their
irritating me.
criticisms despite my tab targeting preferences. Before moving on to the
Trying to
weapons
make this
and
black.
abilities themselves, I think it's important to quickly discuss the mob difficulty and AI, because I was genuinely surprised by how bad Steven is at this. I mean, how nicely tuned the mobs were in terms of difficulty. These Minotaurs seem to have a nice pool of mechanics. The Shaman in
Yeah, I'm
particular had a
waiting for
heal,
this
a
game,
bubble, and
for sure.
non-dodgeable water bolt ability. And for the first mobs really
Why
seen
this
in
shit not
action
doing what
in
I
this
want?
highly
This is
anticipated
irritating me,
MMO,
man.
yeah, I was fairly pleased. So onto the weapons. As you can see, the longbow features powerful but slow shots with the additional depth to allow their attacks to be held down momentarily, increasing their damage per shot. The short bow fires a lot faster, most likely featuring
That's
a
it.
slightly shorter range, but they did state it has an increased critical chance or damage multiplier. Finally, we move on to the abilities. The first on the bar is Snipe, a powerful charged arrow, able to one-shot the lesser guard dogs that has a very visceral and
Think that's
deliberate animation. Fairly standard for rangers, however, its presentation and impact is certainly well presented.
Yeah, this is Snipe. This is the one I was talking about earlier, where it's kind of like the basic attack, but a lot more powerful. You can hold this, and when you see that little flash there at the end, that indicates indicates that it's fully charged.
Next, we have Quick Shot, which actually gives us our first indication of how we may be able to build a ranger, as a Quick Shot stacks a debuff that increases the damage done with repeated attacks. No doubt there will be ways to buff this ability in their skill tree.
200 steps instead of 100.
So basically, each shot of Quick Shot will increase the damage of the next application
Yeah, I'll do 200
of that
steps.
specific attack against the target. So it kind of encourages to unload all 3 of your charges for a big spike of burst damage, but that does come at the cost of each charge comes back individually, so you either have to wait a longer period of time to get that burst,
Come on.
or you can just
There
kind
we
of
go.
leave them in here and there if you want more readily available damage.
And finally, we have the cream of the crop, the final skill shown, Airstrike.
Airstrike does a lot of things.
Got it. This is how I want it.
Facing, and it rains 3 projectiles down in the path that you're going.
Yeah,
and
buddy.
Each of those projectiles does damage, AoE, and also the targets.
Yeah, I cannot wait to play this shit. I can't
The
wait.
presentation, the camera work, the effects are real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Abilities and spells turn out on less traditional classes like the Summoner or Bard. There was a brief Q&A to clarify some of these mechanics.
Huh? I said, yeah. All right, y'all. Okay, back to it.
And a couple of these are worth mentioning in today's breakdown. First of all, no ammunition is confirmed for the bow, and I tend to agree that ammunition is a mechanic that we graduated from as a community many years ago. It adds nothing, and it's pointless micromanagement that punishes players who choose this weapon as their main type. Completely arbitrary in my opinion. However, they are thinking about special kinds of buffs from equipment like quivers that have a cooldown, likely meaning that you can slot these onto your bars as a kind of trinket-like on-use item that affects the next few attacks, leaning into some horizontal
that's what I
and
was trying to get to.
preparation-based advantages. I like this a lot. Players in MMORPGs should always be rewarded for being prepared. This is quite literally one of the core mechanics that set apart an MMORPG to an arena-based game. Secondly, it was confirmed that some abilities require certain weapons to be equipped to use. So these ranger abilities, for example, cannot be used until a bow is equipped in the first place. This helps reinforce some of that class identity. Things like having a tank wielding a wand or a ranger wielding a shield, for example. Some things just don't fit aesthetically or mechanically, so I'm interested to see how this ends up affecting our equipment during the initial stages of Alpha 2. And to be honest, that pretty much covers the majority of the important beats for the basic ranged combat and ranger archetype showcase. I will of course be elaborating further on this in the next video after I've watched this 100 times, and I'm really looking forward to bleeding this live stream out for another 10 videos.
Yeah, I can't wait for this shit.
They ended today's live stream with a bunch of interesting concepts, and although I always claim these parts of the stream are my favorite, I cannot deny that the Ranger, Minotaurs, and ranged combat was pretty much the star of the show this month. However, despite that, the concept is still worth seeing, but I won't spend too much time going over it all. Starting with the Najash tribe, Nagas, fully textured, and although we already knew this from last month's live stream, they were confirmed for the launch of Alpha 2. However, they further clarified
you can't tell me they ain't dope, bro.
From a deep city below magma.
That's fire. That's fire.
Interesting. Maybe that large volcano biome is confirmed after all, which is interesting because I assumed that these were going to be in the desert, but who knows now. Then we got a brand new hostile NPC mob.
Yo, y'all can't tell me this ain't dope, bro.
Hey. The land, but got turned. I'm really looking forward to finding out the origins of these, as they were confirmed to be inhabitants of the ancient ruins around Vera. Steven even teased that they have a super cool stop-motion-like animation loop. Next, for the first time in Ashes of Creation's history, we have our first look at some zombie mobs. After all, a fantasy world isn't complete without a good zombie or two, and they of course look amazing. Steven teased again, their spawning mechanics may mimic something similar to the earth elementals from the Melee Combat Showcase, popping up the ground and grabbing our legs. More well-designed immersive spawning mechanics that just continues to relight my faith in this team's ability to build a solid, worthwhile world to spend our time in. They followed this up with some well-designed Draga-like ghost folk, and these continue to reflect the spooky vibe of October. The Sabertooth was next, a part of the Withered set back in October 2020, and felt appropriate to show alongside these ghosts. Next, we got a solid look at the
I had one from the other day I was working on. I want to show y'all. I'm just dragging in here for a second.
Showing them in
Let me know what y'all think.
detail compared to their in-game counterparts, and they do indeed look amazing. But I'm only really writing this part of the script to stall a little bit so you can get a good look at them before moving on. Finally, we concluded with a couple of
here's the other one that I got.
Starting with the Empyrean in
this one I was working on yesterday to mess around with.
To the newly
Let me see something.
Concept for the Kalar males and females, but who gives a shit, am I right? Because we also got a look at the Nikua females this month, leaving us with just actually, I think we're done now for concepts, unless the Dunir dwarves will receive one final stylized concept.
Yeah, that's dope. I like that style they use for this game.
Already look as perfect.
I'm sorry, y'all. I'm a nerd. It's just the stuff that I watch.
Everything from this month's live stream, and what an amazing month it was once again. I'm really looking forward to the future now that we fully understand these core combat mechanics.
Yeah, I'm a straight nerd. I know. If y'all got any ideas for some videos and shit, whatever it may be, think it may be cool or dope, hit me up. I know I'm supposed to watch a video from dude named Trippin'. Dude, dope as fuck, like really good with his content. Funny as shit though. Let's see.
Sneak.
I haven't watched this shit.
I know I've talked about a lot of horrible sneaker stores on this channel, but this one is by far the worst. Hear me out. Pedophile allegations, creepy behavior, abuse, cheating scandals, a dark past, lawsuits, horrible sneaker prices, and even this sneaker store owner being in contact with me and threatening my livelihood. Essentially, wait.
I don't know about this one.
Let's talk about it. Once again, whenever I make these types of videos, they are essentially all allegations that can't be proven as real. Look at me. I am just some YouTuber talking and making videos. I am doing my best to share my personal experiences, but also do my best investigation work and find the truth in the situation. No means am I saying the truth in this video, but just speculation and leaving all my questions open-ended for my viewers' interpretation. With that out of the way and my ass saved from any legal action down the road, well, let's begin today's video. Today, we are going to be talking about Impossible Kicks, a sneaker store that you probably haven't heard of before, as they've only been around for less than 2 years. If you search their name on YouTube, their social media presence is essentially nothing. On their Instagrams, well, like they have like a decent following, but once again, it looks heavily inflated and most likely and probably artificially enhanced. Also botted. Yeah, it's probably botted for followers. Depending on where you are in the United States, there is most likely an Impossible Kicks near you. Probably you had no clue of that, honestly. Impossible Kicks has 16, yes, 16 locations, where on average they open a new sneaker store every single month. They have multiple locations in New York, Texas, Florida, and even California, where all these sneaker stores are in luxury high-class malls, and their stores are actually very well put together. I mean, they're way better than just, hey, grass wall, fucking neon sign, make a sneaker store. You guys get what I'm saying. These sneaker stores just give off the perception of them being higher class and appealing to those who are clueless to sneaker prices, but follow hype blindly and could care less about the price because, hey, it's name brand, it's cool, I'm gonna buy it. Looking at their website, I almost had a seizure looking at these inflated prices. If you think the prices of the most popular sneaker stores are bad on YouTube, well, these fools really are something else.
God damn.
This sneaker store, well, it's obvious how they're making their money and how fast they are expanding with
Jesus,
investment
they
money.
reselling like a
It's obvious they have
motherfucker.
some
Them prices are
serious
crazy.
investors who are looking to expand as quickly as they can and establish some sort of.
And the funny thing about the Panda Dunks, hold on, let me find it. Where is it? They selling Panda Dunks for $348 when you go to like StockX or GOAT and get them about 200, something like that. Let me see how much they are on StockX. There we go. Panda Dunks. Bro, you get these for $184 and these fools are selling it for $348. Bro, come on. Yeah. They taxing. They are taxing. I would not buy from them. Let's keep this shit going though.
This sneaker store, well, it's obvious how they're making their money and how fast they are expanding with investment money. It's obvious they have some serious investors who are looking to expand as quickly as they can and establish some sort of monopoly over the sneaker world. In the grand scheme of things, this is a great idea, but the longevity of this won't be for long. How do I know this? Well, let's look at the owner. This owner has had a shady past where he was previously a reputable, quote-unquote, car salesman. He grew his business and expanded with multiple locations. Sounds familiar, right? Well, the current owner of Impossible Kicks was actually sued for breach of contract, and even allegedly his business partner at the time was sentenced to 27 months for defrauding lenders. Oh yeah, even the owner was hit with counts of bank fraud, and this was the third time of him doing so. But if you really think that isn't that bad, well, look at the reviews of his car dealership. It is filled with negative reviews describing it as hell, how bad it is, and the worst customer service ever. Overall, filled with fraud, lies, and other horrible things to deceive customers and take advantage of them. Sounds pretty familiar when we look at the current prices of their sneakers, right? No matter where you go on the internet with the current owner of Impossible Kicks, he is always tied to something negative, even allegedly cheating on his wife and always bragging about his sexual pleasures to workers. Oh god, here we go. From accounts by workers of Impossible Kicks, the owner only hires minors and other people between the ages of 17 and 24. Even allegedly, from a worker's account, he stares them down and vigorously flirts with them. Looking at the current staff of Impossible Kicks on their social media, well, that looks to be true. The workers are very young, but to throw around this allegation is silly and pretty detrimental to someone's life. Despite all this shady and shitty things, calling this man crazy or even a pedophile, I mean, that's pretty crazy. Are a few screws loose in this man's head? Of course. Pedophile? Probably not. Despite the allegations against this man, there are many things that can be documented online about his shady past, and it really makes you question how this sneaker business will end up. Will it be successful, or really, who even knows? This owner actually contacted me earlier this year with an offer. The owner messaged me with an offer to do an interview, also saying that he was hiring all of Cam's Kicks' former employees. If you didn't know, during this time, Cam's Kicks was closing down his last sneaker store, and all of his employees were getting picked up by Impossible Kicks. I was very skeptical of this, so I asked a few more questions. He gave me a lot of details at the current time. He described his 9 sneaker store locations. He then said how they were doing $5 million in sales every single month, and that he has been following my channel since it was growing, which I thought was very odd. But at the time, I really didn't think much of it. I asked about if he just wanted to put Cam out of business, and he said he just wanted talented employees and how Cam was paying them dirt. I even questioned this and said, well, Cam's employees didn't really seem that knowledgeable. Just a bunch of bummy sneaker resellers working at a shop. I mean, what is the criteria here? The conversation continues with me asking questions about his business model and what Cam's employees would be doing in the near future. He said that he was closing a deal with Bo, someone you might have seen in Cam's videos, Common Hype's videos, and even Sneak City's videos, and other employees, and making it sound amazing, and also shitting on Cam during the process. I mean, how could you not? After that, he sent me his phone number and the conversation continued. From this point, I don't have any of our messages as I blocked him and deleted all of our conversations. But during this time, we had a lot of phone calls going back and forth. Even in the beginning, I interviewed him on Discord, where unfortunately, once again, I don't have the recording, but let me just say, he was hyping it up, making it sound like the best thing ever, and once again, shitting on Cam, Comment Hype, and all these other sneaker stores, in the process, making him sound like the best sneaker store ever. But throughout this time, he was convincing me that I would be able to be the general manager at their Detroit location. Note, this is despite me ever meeting this man or even ever knowing really anything about sneakers, legit checking, or any real retail experience at all. At first, obviously, everything sounded amazing. A 6-figure salary, him covering a housing and moving fee, and all these extra benefits like compensation and connections. As time went on, I was really speculating about all of this, as there was something in the back of my head that made me really nervous. Around the time of late February, the Detroit store was about to open. Between this time, I was ducking his invitations for him to fly me out to Florida for another opening. Overall, it was just very weird. Like, I'm not gonna get flown out by this weird older man, stay at a hotel he's paying for, and then go to his sneaker store to like work there and like do all this shit. Like, no, like, you know what, hey, like, that's a little bit too weird for me. As time went on, it was soon to be obvious to me why I was even messaged in the first place. It was for my following. The owner doesn't care about experience or literally anything you need to know about business. As long as you have a following and can help cross-promote Impossible Kicks, then you are hired. During this time, I messaged one of the people who were involved with Impossible Kicks, letting him know about the owner's sketchy past. No more than 2 minutes later from me sending this text, I got a call from the owner and the person who I texted in a 3-way call. The owner quickly tried to cover up this entire situation, but at that point, I was just lost. Eventually, the Detroit store opened, where I obviously didn't attend, despite at the time, Cam's Kicks was there, and actually his older employees randomly got the job as a manager and assistant manager. Even more weird, they just did a random hiring and screening process at the grand opening. They didn't even have employees until the grand opening. I was about to uproot my entire life and drop everything for this obscure retail job, and from everything, so sketchy, bro. Yeah, it would have been hell. How the business is portrayed, it sounds amazing, new, fast, and a big growing business, but is built on lack of integrity, greed, and lies. They make this business seem so amazing, and how can you not buy into it and believe it? The owner was a car salesman.
Brother trying to hit a lick on everybody just to get $1. That's crazy.
He knows what to say to make you believe into it. He really knows what to say and knows what you want to hear at all times. The offer sounded amazing, but looking back, I am so thankful I did not follow up on this, because as the months went on, it was slowly unveiled to me that everything he was saying was a lie. The pay wasn't that much. The hours were grueling, and everything about him was just so bad. He makes himself seem so happy and joyful on camera, in photos, but then if you look past all of that, he is just another shady, slimy businessman trying to monopolize sneakers and essentially ruin the culture. With that, I hope everyone enjoyed today's video. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in tomorrow's video. Goodbye.
Well, damn. Well, damn. Everything sound good until you get there. It'll be that bullshit. All right, what else? What else? What else can we watch? What else can we watch? Thread. Yeah, rude. I fuck with this brand. Let's get it. I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing with this hyena, like what color I want to make it on. I'm confused on that part.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Threaducation. Today I'm back with a video that I've been wanting to make for a very long time, and yes, I am of course talking about the history of Rude. The reason that I've been wanting to make this video is because I know that many of you watching this right now are interested in starting your own label someday, or perhaps you already have started your own label. And I think that this story of how Luigi Villaseñor launched his own luxury label from scratch is one that you can learn a lot of lessons from. Beyond that, I think that Luigi is one of the most promising designers of his generation. So I think it'll be good to take a step back, acknowledge how far he's come in a short period of time, and perhaps we can even get a glimpse of where his future's headed. So without further ado, let's get into it. This is the history of Rude. In 1992, Luigi Villaseñor was born in the Philippines. All things considered,
dang, homie, what, 20?
But thanks to his father's job as
28,
he was able to spend time in different parts of the world at a young age, such as Saudi Arabia, Hong Kong, and Thailand.
Damn.
The opportunity to experience these different cultures undoubtedly played a part in the way he viewed the world growing up, but the Philippines was where he called home. At least that was the case until 2001, when political unrest in the country forced his family to move to the United States. They settled on moving to Los Angeles, a city that Luigi would one day grow to know and love, but at the time it was a very difficult transition for him. The move was so abrupt that they really had no time to prepare for it, so upon their arrival, his family had nowhere to stay except for his aunt's living room. And even after that, they only had the resources to move into a one-bedroom.
Yeah, I plan on putting these on. This right here, damn it, hold on. This, when I'm showing now, I'm trying to have this ready for the end of the month, hopefully, or the beginning of, well, at the end of October, I'm trying to have these ready to go. So, yeah, I'm just working on some stuff for this month that I'm going to drop. So, I'm going to have tees, sweatshirts, and hoodies, just to give people more variety to pick from. So, yeah.
To make matters worse, 9-year-old Luigi hardly spoke any English, so you can imagine how hard it was for him to fit in. In hindsight, this may have actually worked to his benefit, because his inability to communicate led him to become incredibly observant in ways that his peers were not. For instance, like most other kids his age, Luigi gravitated towards basketball and rap music, and living in Los Angeles, the figures he looked up to the most were Kobe Bryant and Tupac. But because he really couldn't understand what they were saying, he paid more attention to visual cues, like what they were wearing and how they styled it. Over time, his English improved, and his interest in things like basketball, rap, and other facets of pop culture helped him blend in among his classmates. But that observant eye of his continued to develop. During his high school years, one of the things he noticed was that a lot of other kids at his school didn't necessarily care about how well they were dressed, but they cared a lot about the brands they were wearing. Taking note of this, a light bulb went off in Luigi's head. With his family just barely being able to make ends meet, he was desperately in need of a way to make money. So he headed to a nearby store, bought a bunch of affordable vintage clothing, then ripped the tags off of expensive designer clothing and sold it to other kids at a premium. Maybe not the most moral hustle, but at the end of the day, he was just a teenager trying to support himself, his customers walked away happy, and most importantly, this served as his first real introduction to the power of branding. To be clear, the lesson was not that you can just go around tricking people, the lesson was that fashion has everything to do with perception. If you successfully create the perception that something is a luxury item, it will warrant the demand.
I do kind of like it like this though, like that's fire.
Ripping the tag off.
That is fire. You can't tell me that's not dope.
An LL Bean jacket sort of lets you skip the hard part here because the name Saint Laurent is already associated with luxury. But if you can create the same perception with your own brand, then it's basically a gold mine.
Let me see.
I'm not saying Luigi would follow this path, because as we'll see in a bit, he would actually go on to create extremely high quality clothes that genuinely deserve the title of luxury. But the point is, this was his first time seeing that there was real money to be made in the fashion industry and that it was actually a viable career path. Now, beyond the simple fact that he could make some money, Luigi was beginning to discover his own personal style.
Yeah, I like that a little better.
Surprisingly, his interest in basketball and rap music led him to an interest in streetwear. For the most part, this meant wearing cool graphic tees and sneakers, but he always found unique ways to style himself. In a later interview, his sister Roxy would say that he was
That's better. That is better.
And anytime he'd wear something, it wouldn't be too long before other kids started wearing it as well. Once again, I think this can be attributed to his observant.
Yeah, I seen them yellow taxis, bro. I seen that shit.
But he was able to predict them. So from pretty early on, it was clear that Roigi was cut out
I got
for
the
fashion, and that's something
the Pollens in the back. I want to swap them out for the taxis.
That his father wanted him to pursue a more conventional career path, like becoming a doctor. You can't really blame him because he just wanted his son to have a steady job with reliable income.
I want to flip these
that many entrepreneurs in the fashion industry struggle to achieve even when things are going well. But Roigi's commitment never wavered.
I like this better.
Desperate to learn as much as he could, he made a friend that taught him the ins and outs of screen printing. And in addition to this, he enrolled in a fashion course that they offered at his school. While this was far from a formal education in fashion, he certainly made the best of it. One thing I want to emphasize here is that although Roigi is by nature very talented, he is also extremely smart.
Yeah, I fuck with Rude. I like it's like a simple ass brand and just high, like somewhat high end, but
to put this into perspective,
yeah, Rude, I fuck with it. Simple
designs. He developed his own chemical solution that could be used to create a sun-dried effect on his clothing. This out-of-the-box thinking is the type of stuff that separated him from the herd very early on. When everyone else was thinking about how to create the coolest logo or colorway, he was focused on perfecting the texture of his material. If you ask me, this is a very mature approach to design for a teenager, and it highlights the fact that Roigi was wise beyond his years and wise beyond his peers. You see, he ended up graduating at the top of his class and was his high school's valedictorian, but unlike a lot of the kids that he was graduating with, he didn't really know what he wanted to do next. He was smart enough to attend a top university, but his financial situation didn't really allow for that. And even though he'd fallen in love with fashion, he wasn't really sure how to make a career out of it quite yet. He settled on enrolling in an art history program at a local community college, if for no other reason so he could say he was going to college, but he ended up dropping out after just 1 week because he couldn't force himself to do something that he wasn't truly passionate about. That said, the only option left was for him to shift his attention towards what he was passionate about, fashion. Hey guys, I just quickly want to pause and let you know that I've officially partnered with Farfetch, and right now you can use the
I ain't getting paid for this ad, I ain't running it.
Pattern making is essentially the process of creating a 2D template that can be used to cut the actual fabric for a piece of clothing. Getting the right measurements and proportions can be extremely difficult, but Roigi knew that mastering this skill would take him to the next level. And he actually had some luck on his side here, because his
let me try something.
She was able to help him learn a lot of the fundamentals.
I'll just experiment right now, but we're gonna try something.
She did play a big role in helping him develop the foundation of his technical skill set. Being the quick learner that he is, it didn't take long for him to get the basics down, and in search of a more hands-on experience, he applied for an internship with the menswear designer Sean Sampson. Sampson had just recently launched his eponymous label after graduating from the legendary design school Central St. Martin's in London, and having been born in California, he decided to base his studio in Los Angeles. This was the exact type of opportunity that Roigi...
Why is it that, like, Los Angeles is, like, the place? Like, if you don't have a brand, like, if you're not in LA, you don't have a brand. I'm so over that shit. It's always LA brands, LA brands, LA brands. Man, what are, like, fucking, like, Texas, really, like, what are Dallas, at Houston, Atlanta, Miami's, and New York? It's always LA. That's all I hear about, mostly. I mean, there's other brands out there, but just strictly LA brands. Well, they got all the manufacturers and shit out there for their custom pieces, so I get it.
Roigi was looking for, and because he possessed a useful skill such as pattern making, Sampson was happy to have him on board. From the outset, working for Sean Sampson was an eye-opening experience. Roigi was now witnessing firsthand everything that went into running a high-end menswear label, and he soaked up every bit of knowledge that he could from the Central St. Martin's graduate running the show. In a sense, you could probably even say that this was his version of design school. He was just there to learn as much as he possibly could, and that's exactly what he did. But while all of this was going on, there was something very interesting unfolding across the country in New York City. It's no secret that New York City is the fashion capital of the United States, and back in the early 2010s, streetwear was controlling the entire conversation. In a later
Now it's
interview with
LA.
Idea Generation, Roichi reveals that he was paying particularly close attention to one brand called Alien NYC.
Yeah, this
because
ain't turned
something
out how I
about their pieces
expected.
just happened to catch his eye, and he liked the idea that they were a part of this ongoing
Yeah, this ain't
streetwear
turned out how I expected.
Seeing this, he got to thinking about how he could create something similar back in LA, and that's when he arrived at the idea that it was time to launch his own brand. Between working for
Yeah,
Taz
this ain't
Arnold and
turned
Sean
out.
Sampson, he'd already accrued a fair amount of real-world experience, and as I mentioned
Oh,
earlier, he had an affinity for anticipating style trends. So all in all, he felt like he was in a good position to give it a go, and that's what he did. But ultimately, this new venture of his would end up being a short-lived one. You see, he named this new brand Primitive, and he intended for it to be a creative collective similar to the one that Alien NYC had created. But not long after getting started, a store opened up in LA under the name Primitive, and this pretty much threw off his whole branding effort. He couldn't really promote the brand without people thinking it was associated with the store, and because he hadn't had the foresight to trademark the name, there was really nothing that he could do about it. So
Damn,
just
that's
like
fucked
that,
up.
he stopped working on Primitive, and rather than trying to build an entire brand, he took a step back and started focusing on individual pieces. Now, something that we haven't really talked about up until this point is that Roichi was very active on MySpace, and by posting his work there,
Damn, I
he
ain't hear
was
about
able to
MySpace
make
in a while.
connections in the online streetwear community. He was far from internet famous, but this was a good way for him to market his pieces, and it's true what they say about how you never know who's watching. You see, not long after walking away from Primitive, Roichi tapped into his West Coast roots and created an all-over Print Bandana T-Shirt. When he first made it,
I
he
remember
wasn't
that shit.
necessarily thinking about creating something he could sell, but he ended up taking a few photos of himself wearing it and put them on his website. After that, he just waited and waited and waited. The shirt was cool, but the fact of the matter is that not many people were seeing it, and with a $150 price tag, the few people who did stumble upon it weren't convinced enough to part ways with their money. It's not like Roichi expected the orders to be flying in out of nowhere, but he was still let down by the fact that not a single person was interested. At least, that was the case.
Yeah, I
one
know
day,
that feeling.
Seemingly out of the blue,
I know
he
that
was
feeling.
contacted by somebody saying they wanted the shirt, and that somebody just so happened to be Kendrick Lamar's stylist. By chance, they'd found the shirt online and told Roichi that it would be perfect for one of Kendrick's upcoming press appearances. As I'm sure you can imagine, he was ecstatic about the idea of a West Coast legend in the making wearing his West Coast inspired design, so he happily
Why does
sent
keep
over
happening?
one of the shirts.
What the fuck?
And after that, he really didn't give it too much thought. At most, he hoped he'd be able to generate more interest in his work by saying that Kendrick Lamar was a fan, but little did he know that this one t-shirt was about to change everything. On July 1st, 2012, Roichi was sitting at his parents' house watching the BET Awards, and he
Alright.
could hardly believe his eyes when Kendrick walked up stage to receive
Hot
the
that.
Lyricist of the Year award wearing the shirt he'd sent him. Hardly able to contain himself, Roichi started jumping around the room as he realized that the so-called press appearance the stylist had been talking about was the BET Awards. Kendrick ended up performing in the shirt later on in the night, thus giving it even more
Ooh,
attention.
kind of like that.
And as unbelievable as all of this was, it was only the beginning. Kendrick's appearance was one of the most talked about things on the internet that night, and by association, Roichi's social media accounts started blowing up almost immediately. As he tells it, he was riding in the car with his sister the next day when he checked his phone.
That's
He could
crazy, man.
barely
You just
believe his
never
eyes
know,
upon
bro.
seeing the amount of orders that had come in on his website.
That shit is just
Overnight,
clean.
He'd racked up more than $150,000 in sales. Roichi will be
And it just take one person to just make everything just pop. And that's the dope part about it.
the first one to tell you that he had tears in his eyes looking at the
And these
numbers,
pieces are
because
dope.
this really
The
was
earth
a life-changing
tones,
amount of money.
that hat
When his
hard,
family moved to the country, they couldn't afford to have more than a one-bedroom
a
apartment.
corduroy.
And
Man,
up until this point,
I
he'd
like
been
that.
flipping
Yeah,
vintage
Rue
clothes
is that
just to
brand.
get by. But
Fuck
now,
that high
in the
fashion
blink
shit.
of an
This
eye,
shit
his
is
t-shirt
way
was
better
bringing
than
in
that
so much
Gucci
money
and
that he didn't
Balmain
know what
and
to do with
I said
it.
Balmain,
And I mean that
Balenciaga,
literally.
Balmain,
With a
whatever.
bigger balance in his bank account, Roichi could now afford to pay for
This
the
shit
luxury
hard.
lifestyle he'd always wanted.
This
But he
hard.
could only afford it for so long. You see, once the dust settled, he was left with a Mercedes, a collection of watches, designer clothes, and no money. There was nothing left to reinvest into the brand, and that meant there was no way for him to keep the cash coming in. He realized his mistake, but at the same time, he had no regrets about getting a taste of the lifestyle that
Man,
he
I
had
never
worked
spend
towards
all
for
that
so
fucking money
long.
on dumb
In
shit.
fact, this whole ordeal actually motivated him more because he knew that he needed to start treating his brand like a real business if he wanted this lifestyle to continue. That said, he got right back to work, and the first item on his agenda was picking out a name for the brand.
Come on.
After moving on from Primitive, he'd really just been working under his own name, and even the bandana t-shirts he released had no real brand affiliation. So when it came to picking a name, he very well could have gone with Luigi Villaseñor, but he knew that he wanted it to be short, ideally one syllable, and easy for people to remember. The other thing he knew that he wanted was for the name to begin with the letters RH. For context here, Luigi's grandfather started a tradition in his family where his children, their children, and so on would all have names that began with RH. And so incorporating this into his brand's name would be his way of paying.
And that's how you leave legacy behind, bro. That's what's dope. Bro used his family legacy, like with the RH in their name, and just applied it to the brand.
Homage to his family.
That's fire.
Keeping this criteria in mind, he cycled through some potential options and eventually settled on the name Rude. It was simple, had a nice edge to it, and perhaps most importantly, it could be spelled with an RH. Having settled on the name Rude, Luigi's next order of business was preparing for his first official release, and as you'll remember, he had no money left, so this put him in a bit of a predicament. Not to be deterred, he decided to look at his financial limitations as nothing more than a business constraint, and when you have a business constraint, all you need to do is find the appropriate business model. For him, the appropriate business model was to host a pre-sale. Hosting a pre-sale is when you put a product up for sale, often in unlimited quantity, and then use the funds you receive to fund production. The downside of this is that you won't be able to ship your product immediately, and in the case of production delays, you might be forced to deal with some very unhappy customers wanting to know where their order is. But if executed correctly, the pre-sale model can maximize efficiency by creating a perfect alignment between supply and demand. In a sense, this is sort of what he did with his first release, because he clearly didn't have $150,000 worth of t-shirts to ship out the door on a day's notice. But this time around, he'd be more prepared because he'd be able to communicate with his manufacturers ahead of time to ensure that they had the capacity to fulfill that many orders without any delays. So all that said, the choice was clear. Without the money to produce his collections up front, Luigi knew that the pre-sale model was his only option. His next big task was deciding what he actually wanted to release, and if you ask me, this was his smartest decision of all. He decided to re-release the Bandana T. More than anything else, this decision came down to the fact that Luigi needed to establish brand recognition. People already knew about the Bandana T, but they didn't know it was his.
Branding
so
is
by
everything.
doing a re-release, he was finally able to associate them with the name Rude. The other piece here is that he knew there was already demand for these tees, so rather than rolling the dice and hoping that one of his new designs would have the same impact, he went with one that already had proven success. So all things considered, this release was the best financial decision and marketing decision that he could have made, and fortunately, it paid off. As intended, he recouped a lot of the money he'd blown from the first release, and this time around, he knew that he needed to reinvest it into his business. That's what he did, but Luigi was about to learn one of the hardest lessons of doing business. Even if you make the right decisions, you won't always get the right outcome. After the Bandana T, he released a couple more pieces with different streetwear / vintage inspired graphics, including one inspired by the Marlboro logo, which has since become one of Rude's signature motifs, and for the most part, these two were a great success.
That shit fire, bro.
But where things really fell apart was with the collection that he called Revolution. By design, this collection was supposed to be a bit more experimental than other things he'd done in the past, and generally speaking, it's good to branch out and try new things, but for some reason, his newly developed customer base just didn't go for it. I'm not necessarily trying to make a pun here, or experimental.
Yeah. Off rip, what I see from this is Virgil. And I ain't mad at it. With the quotation marks, like it was off white thing with Virgil. And I kind of see why people wouldn't be with it. And it was more with that vintage, modern look. So I see why people wasn't too much for this. So it is what it is, but it's dope though. I like this.
And realized that he'd always had an affinity for both vintage and luxury fashion. With the Revolution collection, he had more or less abandoned both of these by pushing the envelope a bit too far with his experimental designs, and seeing that, it became clear to him that he needed a proper return to form. The end result of this return to form would be the now famous Sugarland tee. To put it simply, the Sugarland tee perfectly blended everything that Roiji's customer base was looking for. The graphic on the front, though slightly ambiguous in meaning, drew to mind the aesthetic of highly coveted vintage pieces like the Nirvana tee, and at the same time, the actual quality of the garment was equal to that of a luxury brand. In short, Roiji had another hit on his hands, and you could even say that the success of the Sugarland tee rivaled that of the Bandana tee. This gave him the spark he needed to continue going, and from there on out, there was no looking back.
There we go.
The first thing that Roiji did with his money from the sale of the Sugarland tee was plan a trip to Paris. And this was actually a significant moment in his life, because something we haven't really talked about yet is that while all of this was happening, he and his family were quietly waging a legal battle over their immigration status. In fact, a lot of the money he'd been earning was going directly to an immigration lawyer, but fortunately, he was able to get everything settled. And once that was done, he was finally, for the first time since moving to the US, able to leave the country without fear of being barred from re-entry. So even though he'd promised to continue reinvesting his profits into the brand, you can see why this trip was much deserved. And in a twist of fate, it actually was an investment in the brand, because while in Paris, he was able to set up a meeting with buyers at the luxury department store Barney's. For those of you who aren't familiar with how this works, luxury department stores like Barney's and Saks Fifth Avenue have employees called buyers who are in charge of determining what brands they're going to stock at the store. To even get a meeting, you usually need to have some proof of concept, meaning evidence that people are interested in your brand, and between the Bandana tee, the Sugarland tee, and a few other well-received pieces, Roiji had enough proof to get his foot in the door. So once he arrived in Paris, he went to meet with the buyers at Barney's, and much to his delight, they agreed to place a massive order. Not only did this provide him with a major influx of cash, but it really did take Rue to the next level. Just like that, he went from being this young kid selling clothes online to being the owner of a brand stocked at one of the largest luxury retailers. In the moment, he felt like he was on top of the world, but little did he know that it was all about to come crashing down.
Damn.
The order placed by Barney's was larger than any that Roiji had fulfilled before, and thinking that he was making a smart business decision, he hired a new manufacturer that promised to deliver all of the products within the time frame he needed and at a lower cost. It almost sounded too good to be true, and that's because it was. When Roiji finally got the pieces in hand, the quality was way worse than what he'd been expecting, the proportions were hardly what he'd asked for, and they were littered with factory defects. Now this really wasn't his fault, and if anything, it just came down to the fact that he had a lack of experience dealing with large-scale manufacturers, but nevertheless, the problem was his to deal with. He knew that his customers wouldn't be happy with this quality of product, and he knew that sending these pieces to Barney's would make for a bad first impression. The bottom line here was that the clothes didn't live up to the extremely high standards that had been set for Rude, and with that in mind, Roiji made the very difficult decision to scrap all of it.
Damn.
Again, in his interview with Idea Generation, Roiji estimates that this sent about $250,000 down the drain.
Damn.
That doesn't even include what he had to pay to have the entire collection produced again by a different, higher quality manufacturer.
Shit.
Roiji himself admits that this whole mess nearly pushed him to the point of giving up on Rude altogether, but somehow he was able to persevere and overcome this setback. Any hope that he'd had of profiting from this first order by Barney's had effectively been eliminated, but in a way, he'd earned himself a second chance, and this time around, he was going to do things differently. In case you haven't already noticed, a consistent theme throughout this story has been that each time Roiji faces adversity, he takes a step back, reevaluates his approach, and then adjusts his course accordingly. This is a formula for success that anyone can follow, but the reason
that's
that
crazy,
it works
man.
so well for Roiji is that when he reevaluates his approach, he is brutally honest with himself. For instance, after blowing the first check from his release of the Bandana tees, he was honest with himself about the fact that he didn't want to stop spending money on the finer things in life. so his solution was to work hard enough to sustain that. In this case, Ruigi had a major mishap with the production and fulfillment of his order for Barney's, and he was honest with himself about the fact that he needed help running his business. Make no mistake, it's not that he wasn't capable of handling the business side of things, but the reality is that this had become a full-time job, and it had gotten to the point where it was taking his attention away from actually designing. Without the designs, you don't have a business to speak of, so he knew that it was time to make a change. One of the first changes he made was bringing on George Robertson, a talent agent by trade who had a knack for business dealings and a deep appreciation for Ruigi's work. He also brought in people to help with day-to-day stuff, including his sister Roxy, who had quite literally been there with him since the beginning. Right away, these changes had an impact, and in many ways, this truly was the beginning of a new chapter for Rude. I mean, you have to consider the fact that Ruigi had essentially been playing catch-up ever since his bandana tees blew up overnight. But now, for the first time in the brand's history, everything was coming together.
Damn, I ain't got it plugged,
His
man.
business affairs were in order, and he had the time and resources to focus on creating the masterful collections that he'd always dreamed of. For me personally, it's quite difficult to put Rude's aesthetic into words. It started out with a handful of t-shirts, most of them vintage inspired, but as the brand evolved to center around seasonal collections, it became abundantly clear that Ruigi possessed an incredibly unique design language. As discussed, much of its foundation was built upon streetwear, but it was infused with aspects of more traditional luxury fashion. One of my favorite examples of this is his leather hoodie. Hoodies are something that people wear casually in their everyday life, but Ruigi turned it into a luxury item by reimagining it with high-quality leather. It's an incredibly simple concept, but the real challenge is executing it correctly, and here I think it's safe to say he did just that. Now going back to the brand's aesthetic, it seems that Rude also draws heavily upon elements of both West Coast fashion and Americana. The West Coast inspiration started with the bandana tee, but paisley prints have since gone on to become one of Rude's staple design elements. Then, in terms of Americana, I think that this has manifested in several of the brand's product types, such as varsity jackets and bomber jackets. It's manifested in the brand's go-to materials, including denim and leather, and then it's also manifested in much of the brand's iconography, such as the Marlboro logo. In short, Ruigi pulls inspiration from a variety of different sources, and I think that much of this can be attributed to his unique background. He was born in the Philippines, but got to experience several other cultures at a very young age. He moved to Los Angeles at the age of 9, giving him a fresh perspective on American fashion, and as he grew older, he gained experience working for both a streetwear brand and a high-end menswear label. Needless to say, he's preceded by a wide range of formative experiences, and this has undoubtedly played a role in shaping his design approach. Now, looking at the brand Rude in its entirety, it seems to me that Ruigi has created the perfect streetwear-inspired label for those with a taste for luxury. Given the luxury angle, it should come as no surprise that many of the brand's biggest supporters are rich and famous, and that includes the rap legend himself, Jay-Z. Outside of his own line, Rockaware, Jay-Z has never really been one to publicly associate himself with any fashion brands, which speaks volumes about the fact that he was willing to do so with Rude. It's not entirely clear how Jay and Ruigi connected. I've heard a rumor that it may have had
You can't tell me this ain't
George
dope.
Robertson, who, as I mentioned earlier, is a talent agent, which means that he has many connects in the music industry. But whatever the case may be, all we know for certain is that Jay-Z is one of Rude's biggest fans. He's been photographed wearing the brand on countless occasions, and has even been spotted sitting courtside at a Lakers game alongside Ruigi. I think that alone is proof enough that Ruigi has finally made it to the big leagues, but we can also point to the fact that numerous brands have started seeking collaborations with him. One of the things that I appreciate the most about Ruigi's collaborations is that he uses them to connect with different markets. On one end of the scale, he's collaborated with what I guess you could call big-name, affordable brands such as Vans, Puma, and Zara to make collections that are more accessible to the everyday consumer. But then, on the other end of the scale, he's collaborated with a number of high-end luxury brands as well, such as Canada Goose and McLaren. I don't know how many of you are Formula One fans, but the collaboration between Rude and McLaren is easily one of my favorite collaborations of all time. The collection itself is great. The campaign included driver Daniel Ricciardo, who coincidentally just announced that he'll be leaving McLaren at the end of this season, but more generally, I just love when fashion brands collaborate with non-fashion brands, because it serves as a much needed reminder that fashion exists beyond the runway. Speaking of which, I've sort of seen a trend over the past few years that suggests Rhude may be fully evolving into a lifestyle brand. For example, in 2019, Rhude teamed up with James Purdy to release Rhude's first ever furniture collection. And then, in 2021, he teamed up with the appliance company Instant Brands to
Your
release
bro
a kitchen
came up
set.
like
With
big
both
time,
of these
like no
collaborations,
fucking lie.
Rhude is making a statement, and that statement is that Rhude can be a part of everyday life. This is something that I hope he continues to explore, because these types of projects really allow him to put his masterful craftsmanship on display. Now going back to the main line, Rhude made his Paris Fashion Week debut back in 2019 with the presentation of his Spring-Summer 2020 collection titled 7 Falls. And for him, this was like a rite of passage. He'd spent his entire life admiring high-end European luxury labels, and now, after everything he'd been through, there he was alongside them on the Fashion Week lineup. Since then, he's gone on to host several more fashion shows, all receiving critical acclaim, but the most important fashion show of his life will be taking place later this September. Why is it the most important, you may ask? Well, it'll be the first time that he presents a collection for a brand other than Rhude, because earlier this year, he was named the new creative director of the Swiss luxury fashion house Bally. So some background here, Bally was founded in 1851, and in the beginning they only made shoes, but they eventually added a full ready-to-wear line, and over time, they've grown to become a highly lauded luxury label. That
I mean,
said,
I'm changing this, so this ain't gonna stay the same. I'm trying to find a really good font that I'm gonna like, but it may end up changing.
I mean,
When I
prior
find
to
a-
Rhude,
like from
the brand hadn't
you see
appointed
now.
a new creative director since the former one left back in 2017. But all that said, I think we're
Said
about to
Hallows,
witness a major
Hollow.
turnaround. Bally appointed a new CEO in 2019, and with the decision to bring Rhude on board, they've made it clear that they want to revitalize the fashion house. Now, if you ask me, I think that Rhude is the perfect choice here because he has the skill set necessary to update Bally's rich heritage of luxury to have more mainstream appeal
That
in
was
the
right.
modern fashion
It just seemed
industry.
wrong.
As far as what I expect, I think he's going to be leaning heavily upon Bally's roots as a footwear company. In recent years, he's been focusing a lot more on Rhude's footwear, as he's debuted a number of boots, loafers, and my personal favorite, the recess sneakers. Like I said, this shift is more recent, but if I'm being honest, I think footwear might even be Rhude's strong suit. Don't get me wrong, he's a well-rounded designer to begin with, but something about his shoes just demonstrates his understanding of the synthesis of silhouettes, materials, and colorways. So if my inclination is right that this will be a priority of his at Bally, then I think we're all in for a treat. But either way, I'm very excited to see what he does in this new position. I'm sure there's going to be a learning curve, but I think that it's a real possibility that in a few years' time, Bally will be in the same conversation as some of the larger, more popular fashion houses that we talk about today. Well, that's just about everything I wanted to touch on for the history of Rhude. To me, Rhude is at the forefront of a new vanguard taking the fashion industry by storm. But my hope is that this video gives you an idea of everything it took for him to be in this position. Remember, there was a point in time where nobody wanted his pieces. The bandana tee sat on his website for weeks, if not months, and not a single person wanted to buy it. But that all changed overnight when it was noticed by Kendrick Lamar's stylist. Let me be clear though, this wasn't just luck. Because Rhude had taken the time to learn about creating high quality garments, he created a piece that he was proud of, and he continued promoting it online despite receiving almost no interest upon its initial release. So to me, that's not luck, that's perseverance. And perseverance is something that would be key
Keep
to
going,
Rhude's
shit.
success
Fall on your face,
throughout the
get
early
back
parts
up.
of his career. He abandoned his first brand, Primitive, after failing to trademark the name in time, but he persevered, and that led him to creating Rhude. One of Rhude's first collections, the Revolution collection, was a resounding failure, but he persevered, and that led him to creating the Sugarland collection. Then, after major production issues while trying to fulfill an order for Barney's, he was almost in financial ruin. But once again, he persevered, and this led him to bringing in the partners he needed to help get Rhude on the right track. Ever since then, he's remained on the right track, and now he's the creative director of two major labels.
Alright.
He's earned himself the support of legends like Jay-Z, and most importantly, he's living out the life that he's always wanted to live. Like I said in the beginning, I think that there are many lessons you can learn from this story about what it takes to make it in fashion, but perhaps the most important one is this. Roigi did it, and you can do it too. Anyways, that's all for now. If you liked this video, please remember to subscribe, turn on notifications, and for more fashion content, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Threducation. Other than that, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.
That was a good one. That was a good video to watch. I ain't gonna even hold you. Let's see what else they got on Threducation, because it's a really good channel. I suggest y'all follow this. Let's do pharrel. Fuck it. I gotta turn this to a raster layer. Okay, now I can put the gradient.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Threducation. Today I'm back with a video that many of you have been requesting, and it's for a good reason. Pharrell Williams is undoubtedly one of the most influential figures in modern music, but what we're going to be talking about here is the story of how he became one of the most influential figures in modern fashion. This is genuinely one of the most interesting stories that I've covered so far, and hopefully by the end of it you'll see why that's the case. So without further ado, let's get into it. This is the Pharrell Williams story. Even though we'll mostly be focusing on fashion in this video, I think it would help if I started off by providing some context about Pharrell's start in the music industry. To do so, we'll have to go all the way back to 1992, which is when he and his friend Chad Hugo formed a music group. Pharrell and Chad initially met during band class, and after joining the same band camp, they started hanging out more and making music together. Their friends Shay Haley and Mike Etheridge also entered into the mix, and when the four of them decided to enter a high school talent show, they agreed to call themselves the Neptunes. Now, something I should mention here is that this was no ordinary talent show. You see, Pharrell's school happened to be right next to musician Teddy Riley's studio, and he'd had the bright idea of hosting this talent show to discover up-and-coming talent. The plan was that Teddy would sit alongside a panel of other judges, and he would sign whoever ended up winning the contest. But the funny thing is that the Neptunes didn't actually win the contest. That very well could have been the end of the story, but in an interview with Hip Hop DX, Teddy recalls that he saw something special about the group that the other judges didn't, and overrode their decision by offering them a deal anyway. So this is technically what got Pharrell's foot into the door of the music industry, and from there he started writing and producing for Teddy, as well as for some other big names. One of the more important connections that Pharrell made during this time was one with fellow Virginia native Gene Thornton, who at the time was rapping under the name Malice. The two of them started working on music together, but everything changed when Malice introduced Pharrell to his brother Terrence Thornton, better known as Pusha T. Much like Malice, Pusha T was just starting his rap career, and Pharrell is actually the one who suggested that the two brothers join together to form a duo. They decided to give it a chance, and that is how we got the legendary rap duo Clips. So after just a few years out of school, Pharrell already had a significant amount of experience under his belt, and slowly but surely, he was starting to make connections in the music industry. In fact, one of these connections introduced the Neptunes to the singer Khalees, and they ended up producing her entire 1999 album titled Kaleidoscope. Khalees was already well established in the music industry by this point, so this provided the Neptunes with a lot of exposure. They continued building off of this momentum, and over the course of the next few years, they would mastermind several major hits, including I Just Wanna Love You by Jay-Z, I'm a Slave for You by Britney Spears, and Hot in Here by Nelly, just to name a few. Along the way, Pharrell, Chad Hugo, and Shay Haley also decided to branch off and form a new group called Nerd, which stands for No One Ever Really Died.
I kind of like this a little bit more.
In 2001, they released their debut album titled In Search Of. This was a major turning point for Pharrell because he'd been producing all of these wildly popular songs, and he'd sung the hook of a few songs here and there, but in a sense, this was his true debut as a performing artist. It's also worth mentioning that In Search Of was the first album released on Star Trek Entertainment, which is a record label founded by the Neptunes. Although the label is no longer in operation today, it was the driving force behind a number of influential projects by the Neptunes, Nerd, and Clips, who Pharrell signed in 2002. But anyways, the point here is that in the early 2000s, it was beginning to feel like everything he touched turned to gold. Speaking of which, Pharrell was beginning to develop a reputation for large gold chains. Don't get me wrong, that's what just about everyone in hip-hop was wearing at the time, but he really took things to another level. Only willing to settle for the best, he became a regular customer of Jacob the Jeweler, who, in case you aren't familiar, is one of the most famous celebrity jewelers of all time. As told on his Apple Music show Othertone, Pharrell went to Jacob one day, and Jacob told him something that he hadn't been expecting to hear. Apparently, he had a client in Japan
happy with
that would
this,
bring in
to be
photos of
honest. I
Pharrell's
don't even hold
jeans
you.
and ask him to replicate them in a variety of different colors. By now, Pharrell was more than accustomed to having fans, but right away, he knew that this was something entirely different. Who was this mystery client spending thousands and thousands of dollars to recreate his chains? Well, he had no idea who this was at the time, but Jacob gave him the answer that he was looking for. This mystery client was a young streetwear designer named Nigo. In order to fully understand this next part of the story, we're going to have to backtrack a little bit. If you haven't already watched my video on the history of bape, I
There's
highly
gonna be a
suggest
back
you
print
do.
right here.
But just for context, it's important to know that Nigo had launched his brand bape in 1993.
Yeah, I think I may
and
drop
over the
this in
next
October,
decade, it
later
became
this month.
increasingly popular
What y'all
within
think? Let me
Japan's
know.
streetwear community. As you may know, the brand is largely inspired by the 1968 film Planet of the Apes. In many ways, the decision to base his brand off of Planet of the Apes was a reflection of his fascination with American culture, including American movies, music, and fashion. In pursuit of his passions, Nigo began DJing at different nightclubs throughout Japan, and this eventually led him to work with the English electronic musician James Lavelle. Nigo and Lavelle began working together just 2 years after the launch of bape, so at this point, Nigo was still looking for ways to help the brand grow. Seeing that, Lavelle decided to introduce him to Stash, an American graffiti artist who happened to own a streetwear boutique in New York called Recon. Nigo and Stash connected, and just like that, bape made its way to the United States for the first time. There's still an ongoing debate about who was the first to popularize bape in the US, but to my knowledge, the first prominent celebrity to actually wear bape was Biggie Smalls.
Hey.
In this 1994 photograph taken by photographer Sean Mortensen, Biggie can be seen wearing a camo bape jacket. And while rumor has it that Mortensen is the one who selected the jacket for the photo shoot, the fact that a rapper as popular as Biggie wore it was still a huge deal. Now that being said, I wouldn't say that this popularized bape in any way. As a matter of fact, bape wouldn't become popular in the US until several years later, which brings us back to where we left off in this story. As we discussed, Jacob the Jeweler told Pharrell about Nigo's fascination with his style, but Pharrell didn't give it all that much thought. At least that was the case until Pharrell was planning an entirely unrelated trip to Japan in the early 2000s, and Nigo learned through the grapevine that he was looking for a studio to record in.
Peter Parker.
Nigo reached out to offer him time in his personal studio, and Pharrell happily accepted, both because he needed a place to record, and because it was the perfect opportunity to meet the man that Jacob had been telling him about. So with that settled, Pharrell went to meet Nigo, not knowing that this so-called studio was just one room out of many in a 7-story building that Nigo used to store his cars, collectibles, and of course, tons and tons.
Man, Nigo had a 7-story building where he just stored cars and just stuff. I'm like, how much money this man was making at the time? Like, bruh, that's a lot of 7 floors. 7 floors. Come on. And he just storing stuff. And bro got a car in the building. Like, how do one do that?
Tons of bape. Even though he'd gone there to record, Pharrell
this man got a Lambo in his...
towards the piles of clothing and shoe samples lying around. And that is when the light bulb went off in his head. You see, prior to this trip, Pharrell had started toying with the idea of starting his own streetwear brand. Keep in mind that this was right after the debut of Jay-Z's Rockaware and P. Diddy's Sean John, and while I'm not saying that this was his inspiration, it was definitely becoming more common for those in the hip-hop space to launch their own brands. However, the thing that
should put-
separated Pharrell from the others is that he was already known for his style, and that style was unique to him. He was wearing big chains and sideways hats just like all of the other rappers of his day, but he had an affinity for styling, proportions, and color palettes that they did not. And these are all things that you could argue were inspired by his fascination with skate culture. Something we haven't really talked about yet is that Pharrell is extremely into skateboarding, which, in case you can't tell, is exactly how he earned the nickname Skateboard P. This is important to mention because, as we all know, there's a huge overlap between the worlds of skating and streetwear, and this is something that would clearly manifest in the foundation of his brand. Speaking of which, Pharrell was finally ready to start a brand by the time that he met Nigo, but the only problem was that he didn't know how to do it. As much as he loved fashion, he had no experience designing, let alone any experience navigating the sheer logistics of starting a brand from scratch. In other words, he needed help, and upon meeting Nigo, he immediately knew that he'd found the right person for the job.
That's sick.
After the studio session, the two of them went to dinner, and it was there that Pharrell told Nigo he was thinking of starting a brand called Billionaire Boys Club, a name that implied everyone could take part in the high-end, flashy lifestyle that their favorite rappers portrayed in their songs. Without hesitation, before Pharrell could even give any sort of pitch, Nigo offered to help. And that same night, they worked with Skate Thing, the same graphic designer who had made the Bape logo, to create the now famous Billionaire Boys Club logo.
Yo, Skating,
This all happened
he
rather
did,
quickly.
Skating did Human Made as well.
But in hindsight, Nigo and Pharrell
Go ahead,
really were
Zach.
the perfect match. Maybe this is a bit of a stretch, but I like to look at the Nerd logo and the Bape logo side by side. Yes, they're very different, but at the same time, they're both bold, cartoonish logos that give off a fun, playful vibe. So between Pharrell and Nigo's input on what it should look like, you can see why Skate Thing came up with the logo that he did, and I think I speak for everyone in saying that he nailed it. Now before moving on, I just want to stop for a second and acknowledge how crazy all of this is. Essentially on a whim, Pharrell agreed to meet with Nigo so that he could use his studio, and less than 24 hours later, they were planning on going into business together. Another thing that I want to emphasize here is that this was most certainly an important day in the history of Billionaire Boys Club, but it was also an important day in the history of Bape. As we discussed earlier, Nigo was looking for ways to popularize Bape in the United States, and at the end of their meeting, he gave Pharrell as much Bape as he could physically carry. Sensing the start of something great, in what I can only describe as poetic fashion, Pharrell left behind all of the clothes that he'd arrived in Japan with, and returned back home with nothing but Bape in his suitcase. After returning home from his trip to Japan, Pharrell became the unofficial poster child of Bape, wearing it in photo shoots, music videos, and pretty much everywhere else. This generated a ton of interest among Pharrell's largely American audience because, as we've talked about, he was already viewed as a budding style icon, and so they all wanted to know about this cool Japanese streetwear brand that had seemingly taken over his entire wardrobe. That being said, Pharrell is widely credited with helping popularize Bape in America, and it wouldn't be long before other rappers started following his lead. Thanks to this, Pharrell quickly became synonymous with Bape, and around this time, the only other brand you'd really see him wearing was his own, Billionaire Boys Club. If you ask me, Pharrell and Nigo handled the marketing of Billionaire Boys Club masterfully. Before it was even available to the public, he debuted his new clothing line in the music video for his song Frontin'. This was technically his debut as a solo artist, so the anticipation from his fanbase was already high, and to raise the stakes even more, the song featured none other than Jay-Z. It ended up being a smash hit, having reached #1 on the Billboard's Hot R&B and Hip Hop chart, and this of course drew a lot of attention to the music video. In turn, this drew a lot of attention to the Billionaire Boys Club.
I'm gonna need to download this.
Let
me download this.
Fans naturally began to wonder where they could get one of their own. Adding to the mystique of the brand, he continued wearing unreleased pieces in public appearances throughout 2003, and one other thing I want to point out is that he continuously paired Billionaire Boys Club with
Please don't tell me.
Even though Bape was just beginning to take off in the United States, you have to remember that it was already a well-established streetwear staple in Japan. And by pairing the two brands together in his outfits, he entered Billionaire Boys Club into that same conversation. His friendship with Nigo clearly played a huge part in this, but the bottom line is that pharrel was creating intense international demand for a clothing line that wasn't even out yet. In other words, pharrel and Nigo knew that Billionaire Boys Club was bound for success, and as it turns out, they weren't the only ones who knew. Somewhere along the way, Reebok had caught word of what was unfolding and approached the duo about a potential licensing and distribution partnership. After brief negotiations, they were swayed by the company's promise of helping them become a truly global brand, and in October of 2003, they entered into a formal contract. One of the main reasons that pharrel was inclined to work with Reebok in the first place was because in addition to the main clothing line, he had plans of launching a sub-label called Ice Cream that would primarily serve as a sneaker line.
Yeah, Ice Cream, I posted videos somewhere later, but I remember in high school, I finally got an Ice Cream hoodie, and it had like the running dogs over it, like just a whole bunch of colors of the running fox or dog, whatever you want to call it, like all over print. And I wore that hoodie every single day, and I spent like $120 on that shit. I've saved up a lot of money for that damn hoodie. I wish I still had it if I could find it, because I'll be wearing it right now if I had it. And I don't know what I did with it. I'll post it sometime when I get a chance. Or when I cut this video up and I find it, I'll put it in around this spot so y'all can see it. So hopefully I can find it. But yeah, I remember I was wearing that Ice Cream hoodie so damn much.
Nigo did, of course, have experience with sneaker manufacturing thanks to his beloved Bapestas, but for that same reason, he knew better than anyone how difficult this whole process would be. Reebok was basically stepping in here and saying, "Don't worry, we'll handle it." And just wanting to see his dreams turn into a reality, this was an easy decision for pharrel, but it was a decision that he'd soon regret. In late 2004, barely 1 year after entering into this partnership, pharrel filed a $4 million lawsuit against Reebok.
Jesus.
Why did he file this lawsuit, you may ask? Well, here's what the issue was according to the legal documents. In January 2004, only a few months after the execution of the agreement, certain Reebok personnel began to acknowledge to BBC that Reebok could not adequately produce the full range of licensed products in a manner consistent with the design and quality standards and specifications required by BBC. Reebok repeatedly assured BBC that the non-conforming and disapproved aspects of these samples would be corrected. Reebok, however, failed to correct these deficiencies.
See, that's a shitty part about all of it.
It seems that the production quality was not up to par with pharrel standards. Up until this point, all Billionaire Boys Club apparel was being produced in Japan with the highest possible quality. And from what I'm able to gather, Reebok deemed that it was not financially or logistically reasonable to continue doing so. Any other musician looking to make a quick buck might have let this slide, but Pharrell cared about quality, and he knew that his fashion-minded fanbase did as well. Like I said, the lawsuit was for $4 million, but he wasn't really after the money. He just wanted to force his way out of this agreement. In early 2005, he successfully did just that, as Reebok agreed to terminate the partnership if he would agree to drop the lawsuit. He happily obliged, and thus ended the short-lived partnership between Billionaire Boys Club and Reebok. Although I'm sure he was relieved that this whole mess was over with, there's no denying that it did set the brand back a bit. Reebok's production limitations resulted in a loss of momentum from the initial marketing campaign, and it also derailed other endeavors, such as the Ice Cream skate team. Like many other streetwear brands at this time, Pharrell had the idea for Ice Cream to sponsor its own skate team. With the help of his longtime friend and collaborator Nino Scalia.
Yeah, funny thing, back in high school when I found out about the Ice Cream, like BBC skate team or whatever, bruh, that was like when Kick Push first came out. Everybody was skateboarding. I was skateboarding my ass off, listening to Pharrell, trying to be a part of the team, like the skate team. It was like a weird time back then, but it was fun though. But things like that, it was just like the weird hobbies that I had. I'm not gonna say weird, but the hobbies that I had when I was growing up. And I was just trying to be a part of that skate team, but I wasn't nowhere near good enough to be on that skate team. But it was just fun to be like around other people that you want to hang out with in school, and y'all start skating together. It was dope. That was a dope time. I ain't gonna even lie to you. Like just meeting new people skating and shit.
Yeah,
so
he recruited a team of skaters that consisted of Kevin Booker, Jimmy Garecki,
Terry
Kennedy,
that was the mission.
Jacob Wilder, and Kato Williams.
I remember Terry Kennedy. He used to be on MTV a lot doing shit back in the day.
The idea was basically to provide them with Ice Cream gear, and by way of them
Ice Cream
would earn more credibility and popularity in the skate community. To be fair, sponsoring a skate team was more of a childhood dream for Pharrell than it was a marketing tactic, but objectively speaking, it did help the brand gain traction. In a very short period of time, Team Ice Cream, as they were called, became very influential in the worlds of skateboarding and streetwear. But like I said, this progress would unfortunately be derailed by Pharrell's issues with Reebok. To explain this next part, let me provide some context. In the 2004 music video for Drop It Like It's Hot, Pharrell appeared in a blurred out pair of sneakers, leading fans to believe that the first ever ice cream shoe was officially on its way. As we'd soon find out, this shoe was the ice cream flavor, a simple silhouette that could act as a canvas for the brand's many bold graphic logos. Thanks to appearances on Pharrell and members of Team Ice Cream, the flavor became an instant hit among skaters and non-skaters alike. However, here is where things get interesting. As we know, Pharrell terminated his partnership with Reebok in 2005, and although they were technically still together, this is when the skate team started to drift apart and go their separate ways. The only shoe to release during Pharrell and Reebok's partnership was the flavor, but for some unknown reason, their settlement allowed Reebok to continue producing ice cream shoes for years after, including the Board Flip in 2006, and finally the Board Flip 2 in 2007. These two shoes
I ain't gonna lie, those shoes,
as well as the original flavor,
they are
for
not
all
it.
intents and purposes, the release of the Board Flip 2 marked the end of the already dissipated
I ain't gonna even hold y'all.
Now,
Those
don't
ain't
get me
it.
wrong, they did leave a lasting impression, but the resounding sentiment from members of the group seems to be that if the Reebok partnership had panned out as expected, ice cream could have been an even larger force in skating. All things considered, they're probably right, but Pharrell didn't have time to linger.
That's sick.
Reebok
Yo,
was
you can't tell me
always
that ain't dope with the
and with
oversized
an
print.
army of fans waiting for his next move, he got right back to work.
Yo, that's dope, bro. Yeah, Terry Kennedy was that guy. But those were good times, man. There was some. This right
One of the
here,
main
on.
reasons
Hey,
the
listen.
partnership with Reebok fell apart
Listen.
was because Pharrell wanted all Billionaire Boys Club apparel to be produced in Japan. The hope was that a major company such as Reebok would be able to do so while keeping costs down, but he quickly discovered that this was not the case.
I'm just fucking around, so
The
hold
reason
on.
that this is important to mention
Like, I'm having
is that
fun now.
once the
Now I'm getting in my
partnership was
bag.
terminated, Pharrell was once again in charge of his own production.
Whew,
And
look
while
at
he was
that.
intent upon keeping production in Japan,
You can't. The
you have to
oversized print
remember
looks
that he
sick.
was the one paying out of pocket for it. To compensate,
Appreciate
both
it, appreciate
Billionaire
it.
Boys Club and
Yo,
Ice
that
Cream
oversized
carried
print,
noticeably
bro.
high retail prices. For that reason,
But I gotta
these
scale it
brands
down.
were
I gotta scale it.
considered
I gotta
among
scale it
the-
down.
Some of the earliest luxury streetwear brands. They were by no means the first, but back in
But yeah, the
2006,
colorway do go
the
stupid.
concept
I'm
of
just
a
doing it for
$100
Halloween.
graphic T-shirt was still a relatively novel
I'm trying to
concept.
drop something once a
I
month.
do want to emphasize, however, that Pharrell wasn't just charging high prices because he wanted to, he had to. And as a matter of fact, the price point made things quite difficult for him in the beginning. Keep in mind that online retail wasn't what it is today back in 2006.
Big
so getting
facts.
your pieces into brick and mortar retailers
Yo, it was. I ain't gonna say it was harder, but you really had to go search for shit. And I'm kind of glad when, if you remember back in like 2000, I guess like 8. That's I think when Karma Loot came around. When Karma Loot came around, that's when people went crazy with streetwear. Like, Karma Loot was my go-to. I really didn't care to go to the mall. I went to Karma Loot for my Crooks and Castles, my ice cream, Billionaires Boys Club. What else? It was a whole bunch of brands. I know I'm missing some. Diamond Supply, Black Scale. If y'all remember that, bro, like Karma Loot days, there was like the golden, I think there was like a dope, I ain't gonna say golden age, but there was like the dopest era when streetwear was like popping and everybody was wearing that stuff from Karma Loot. I thought it was dope, but yeah, that's what it should take me back to.
This was absolutely key to running a successful brand. The problem with this was that these brick and mortar retailers also had to make some money from selling the clothes. So by the time it actually hit the shelves, the retail price would be so high.
Yeah, man, Karma Loot, bro.
For this reason,
I ain't been on there
a
in
lot of
so
stores wouldn't
long.
even carry Billionaire Boys Club or ice cream simply for the fact that they couldn't make a profit off of it. If you want to look at the silver lining,
That's
here,
crazy,
the
though.
argument could be
That's-
made that this benefited
I
the
love it,
brands
though, man.
because
That's
it gave
crazy.
them both an air of exclusivity. But in terms of sustainability, this type of business model could only last for so long. And if you ask me, I'm not sure that they would have been able to weather the storm had it not been for Pharrell's success outside of fashion. You
True.
see, in 2006, the year after he ended his partnership with Reebok, Pharrell released his debut solo album titled In My Mind. The album earned him a Grammy nomination and sent waves through the hip-hop community as fans celebrated his masterful production and features from a handful of their favorite artists including Kanye, Jay-Z, and Snoop Dogg, just to name a few. Beyond the music though, one thing that caught people's attention was the cover art. It was just a simple cartoon of Pharrell wearing a Billionaire Boys Club tee and Bapestas, but there was something about it that resonated with fans. And in recognition of this, Pharrell partnered with Nigo to create a website where anyone could
And I remember when this came around,
create a character of
this was the coolest shit that ever like came around like with hip hop and streetwear was this art style. Everybody had like a little avatar that looks like them at the time. Like this was like a real dope fun era. And I remember everybody had this shit. Everybody.
in the same style. This was yet another brilliant marketing technique as it propagated an aesthetic
Commonwealth
that
too.
Pharrell had associated with himself, and it quickly became common to see streetwear fans and hip-hop heads using these characters as their
too
profile
big. I mean,
pictures
it's
on
small.
the internet. This predates social media as we know it today.
Yeah.
But I guess you could say that this was a viral trend.
It was
between
word
the
of
success
mouth.
His debut album and this so-called viral trend that it created, Pharrell was easily one of the coolest figures in all of hip-hop and fashion. This generated enough demand to make up for the high price points of his clothing, and over the next few years, Billionaire Boys
Yeah, them
Club
Kanye
ice cream
Bapesters when he first came out with College Dropout. Bro, that was just a good time, bro. That was a good
became even
time.
more widely recognized than they already were. Before long, just about everyone could recognize the unique design language that they were built off of, as well as the array of signature logos, including the helmet,
fix
the
this.
cones and bones, the diamonds and dollars, and my favorite, the running dog.
Yeah.
Something interesting
So
to mention.
that let me see if I can find it. I'm not gonna find the picture of me wearing it, but that running dog, I had the hoodie with that running dog like all like multiple colors on it, and it was just all over print. Let me see. Ice cream running dog hoodie. Running dog all over print hoodie. It was damn, where is it? It was similar to this, but dang, they only got the yellow one. But I had this hoodie, but it wasn't in yellow. It was like a dark. Here it is. Here it is. This the hoodie I had. I may have to get this, y'all. I had it like in I had like a XL for no reason. This one everybody wearing big shit. Yeah, this one right here, bro. I got to get this one back. I may have to get this for like just to have it in the collection for real. Okay, it was Billionaires Boys Club. Okay, it wasn't ice cream, I guess. But damn. I gotta find a picture of me wearing this. I wore this shit every day. Every day. Got clown for it. I didn't give a fuck.
Here is that right when his own brand
That's
logo
crazy,
took
man.
off, other brands started taking notice. And when I say other brands, I mean major luxury fashion houses. For instance, many people don't know that in 2005, Pharrell and Nigo joined forces with Louis Vuitton's then creative director Marc Jacobs to design a pair of sunglasses called the Millionaires. The first production run was extremely limited, with only 200 of each color being made, and even major celebrities had trouble getting their hands on a pair. For instance, in her book, Raising Kanye, Life Lessons from the Mother of a Hip-Hop Superstar, which released in early 2007, Donda West writes about how her son Kanye desperately wanted a pair of these glasses, and even though she admits it was out of her price range, she had a pair flown in from the Louis Vuitton store in Paris as a Christmas gift.
What?
The fashion house released the glasses on a wider scale in 2007, and from there they became a cultural phenomenon. Countless celebrities were photographed wearing them, and there were even ongoing debates about whose were real and whose were fake, which should tell you everything you need.
Yeah, and I remember they was wearing the hell out of these damn
But
glasses
hands
like in
down, I think my
05.
favorite photo from this time period is of Virgil, Kanye, and Pharrell posing with the sunglasses.
Damn.
Because in case you haven't already noticed,
Bruh.
these look familiar.
Listen, this is like peak era, like shit about to pop off for the next, like, in the coming 20 years with these three. These three, bruh. What we see now is because of these three when it comes to fashion. And you really got to take your hat out to these dudes, for real.
Virgil would later release an updated version of these glasses called the 1.1 Millionaires during his...
Yeah, it's like what, that hoodie, I seen it somewhere. I think I seen it on TV, and I seen it on TV. I'm like, I want that hoodie so bad. And then I went to this place downtown in Atlanta. It was when the underground was actually a thing. And I went to the underground. I had some money I was saving. I had with my sisters. We went to this streetwear store, and they had that hoodie, and I got it for like $120. But I didn't know like a season or nothing back then, because I was still like doing like just regular like high school nigga shit. So I went heavy into fashion, but I was into it. But I wanted that hoodie, and I got it.
Tenure as creative director of Louis Vuitton, and these two became a cultural phenomenon. To be honest, I think that the 1.1 Millionaires may have been even more popular than the originals, but it's cool to think that it all started with a pair designed by Pharrell and Nigo. Louis Vuitton would not be the only major fashion house to take an interest in Pharrell, and we'll be circling back to that a bit later on. But for now, I want to talk about how he was still struggling with the high production costs of his clothing line.
I like this. I think I'm good with this one.
It became unbearable. He needed to make a change, and it just so happens that Nigo did as well. Throughout this whole process of getting BBC and ice cream off the ground, Bape had completely taken off running,
I need to fix
Nigo
that.
knew that he needed to give it his full attention. Of course, you also have to consider that his expertise of manufacturing and production was centered around the Japanese market, and that's where a lot of his business connections were as well. So when Pharrell started floating the idea of moving operations out of Japan, it's entirely possible that Nigo felt like it was a natural time for him to step away, and that's exactly what he did. I want to be very clear in saying that this was not the end of Pharrell and Nigo's creative
Whew,
partnership,
this shit
and it
hard.
was certainly not
Ooh, let
the
me
end
add
of their
one more thing
friendship.
to this.
But this
One
did
more.
mark the end of Nigo's involvement with
One
Billionaire
more.
Boys Club and Ice Cream. While I'm sure it must have been tough to see someone who had
Alright.
been there from the start walk away, it's true what they say about how when one door closes, another door opens. A consistent theme in Pharrell's life is that he likes to form partnerships. He has an ability to bring out the best in other people, and this allows him to balance out his own creative capabilities. When he wanted to make it in the music
God damn
industry,
it.
he partnered with Chad Hugo to form the Neptunes. When he wanted to launch his own clothing line, he partnered with Nigo to launch Billionaire Boys Club. And although it didn't pan out as expected, he also partnered with Reebok to launch his own shoe line. So with Nigo now out of the picture, Pharrell's logical next step was to find a new partner. BBC and Ice Cream were already well established, and he had a firm grasp on the creative side of things, but in need of someone that could help him revise his business plan, he knew he needed a businessman. He got more than he bargained for, however, because instead of finding a businessman, he found a businessman. Forgive me, I'm fully aware of how corny that was, and I cringed while saying it, but yes, in case you didn't get the reference, Pharrell's new business partner would be none other than his friend and frequent collaborator, Jay-Z.
Hey.
In order to understand how this partnership came to be, we're gonna have to walk things back a little bit. Towards the
Yeah,
beginning
bro.
of the video, you may
Yeah.
remember that I mentioned Jay-Z's clothing
Yeah,
line,
cause
Rockaway.
like around that
Well,
time,
Jay-Z
again, like around like the peak of the 2000s, I didn't really know too much of everybody because again, the internet wasn't really what it was. You really didn't know who was who. YouTube wasn't around. So basically, at that time, I didn't know who Don C was until like YouTube slowly started creeping around and me starting to like focus more on Kanye. So they're probably like 07, 08 when I started to like learn more about these people because around the early 2000s, bro, I ain't know who was who. I ain't know who was who. So I was just following the faces that I seen. But yeah, I think it's dope, bro. Real dope.
He never really had the fashion-minded following that Pharrell did. The sheer size of his following meant that his clothing line had a massive customer base. So massive, in fact, that in early 2007, brand management company Iconics purchased Rocawear for more than $200 million.
Sheesh.
Yes, you heard that correctly, more than $200 million, which means that they very clearly saw the value of the brand that he was building. Now fast forward to 2011, and headlines started breaking that Jay-Z had purchased Billionaire Boys Club. Even though they had a history of working together, this came as a surprise to many, including Jay-Z, who took to Twitter saying that he had not in fact purchased Billionaire Boys Club, but that he would instead be partnering with the brand through a joint venture with Iconics, the same company that had purchased Rocawear. The details
I got a question. So,
are a bit
what exactly do Jay-Z, like, what did he actually do? Like, I may be ignorant to this, but if you know, just let me know. Like, what did he do to help this? Like, just put his face in front of it to push it out more or something? I'm just curious.
Here, but basically the stake in ownership belonged to Iconics, and possibly through some other contribution of capital or licensing agreement, Jay-Z became a partner in the deal as well. The simple fact that Jay-Z was involved did give the deal some credibility in the public eye, but for all intents and purposes, this was a complete corporate turnaround. I don't mean that in a bad way, because if we're being honest, it was kind of necessary here. Pharrel was focused on creating the coolest brand possible, and Iconics was focused on turning a profit. And in the fashion industry, there comes a point in time where you need to find a happy medium. Determining exactly what point in time that is can be quite difficult, but in this case, Pharrel had timed it perfectly and was ready for Iconics, with the help of Jay-Z, to step in to restructure things a bit. To that end, the first order of business was shifting production out of Japan. I know that some of you are probably already rolling your eyes as if this is a bad thing, but this really was the right decision.
Let me look that up.
Had they
Hold on, Blueprint 3. I may do this every Saturday for y'all, cause I kind of like this. Blueprint 3 BBC shirt. I don't know which one you're talking about. I have to go see it. Okay, this it? Okay, yeah, that's dope. I like that. That's dope. That's a dope collab. I ain't never see this before. Yeah, I ain't never. How the fuck I ain't never see this? This clean. I like that. Hey, Peter Parker. That's A1, bro. I like that shit.
Stayed in Japan, manufacturing costs would have remained high and overall output would have remained low, but by moving production to different countries such as China and Mexico, they were able to maintain reasonable quality while lowering price points drastically and increasing overall output. What you have to understand here is that there was demand for BBC and ice cream products, tons of people wanted it, but those people were mostly young streetwear and skate fanatics who couldn't afford to be spending hundreds of dollars on clothing. While the products would remain exclusive and, to be honest, still somewhat expensive, Pharrel and Iconics were smart about adjusting their strategy and business model in a way that better accommodated the brand's target audience. They wasted no time putting their new plan into action, and trust me when I say that it worked. In just 1 year, sales more than doubled from approximately 12 million to more than 25 million. Which not only meant a higher bottom line profit, but also meant that more people than ever were getting their hands on these highly coveted pieces. More people buying the brand meant more people wearing the brand, and more people wearing the brand meant more publicity. So in effect, this production shift parlayed into a marketing campaign.
Yeah, no, those tees are clean, bro.
Billionaire Boys Club as a household name. While it's true that a lot had changed since its inception, I think that more than anything else, this is a testament to the power of Pharrel's creative vision. Even in the early days, he saw his brand becoming the next big thing, and I don't think that anyone would argue with me saying that he'd accomplished everything that he'd set out to accomplish and more. However, always in pursuit of new challenges, Pharrel refused to use this as an opportunity to settle, and instead, he set his sights on other things. In 2012, just a year after selling off a stake in Billionaire Boys Club, Pharrel launched I Am Other. It's almost impossible to describe what I Am Other is in its entirety, but in a nutshell, it's an imprint focused on a variety of creative disciplines, including but not limited to music, film, and of course, fashion. The main reason I wanted to highlight this is because the founding of I Am Other coincided with a new chapter in pharrel's history in which he truly embodied being other. He'd always been an out-of-the-box thinker, but the fact that he even wanted to create this imprint was proof enough that he was looking to enter into new lanes and try new things. And while I'm not sure that this was a conscious decision, this is when we started to see a fairly significant shift in his style. Everyone already knew that Pharrell could dress, but his affiliations with brands like BBC, Ice Cream, and Bape left a lot of people placing him in the streetwear category. I'm not saying that they were wrong to do this or that this was a bad thing by any means, but Pharrell's range and style was much wider than I think he was being given credit for. He had of course partnered with the likes of Louis Vuitton in the past, but this is when he really started redefining his aesthetic. If I had to describe the difference, I'd say that prior to this, his style relied more heavily upon the way that his clothes actually sat on his body, best exemplified by his tilted hat and shorts that sagged below his knees. After this shift, however, his style seemed to rely more heavily upon layering and proportions. He'd still wear brands like Bape and BBC, but now he'd wear it with a denim jacket or blazer, perhaps even a scarf, and then he'd mix that in with a few luxury brands. Speaking of which, Pharrell's new style seemed to attract the attention of several luxury brands. In 2013, he partnered with Moncler to release a collection of sunglasses, and in 2014,
I think Moncler probably like one of those high-end fashion like brands I actually like. They ain't too loud, they not out there, they're just simple and just ready to go type wear. I don't know, I just like Moncler. I just like it. No rhyme or reason, it's just dope.
A brand ambassador for Chanel. The relationship between Pharrell and Karl Lagerfeld is something I want to dive into a bit more, because I think it'll tell us quite a bit about Pharrell's transition into higher fashion. Unsurprisingly, high fashion had always been an interest of his, and even during his grungier skate days, he gravitated towards these luxury brands. One of the best examples of this is a 2011 photo where he took it upon himself to stamp a Chanel logo onto his boots. He later revealed in an interview with Women's Wear Daily that as fate would have it, he bumped into Karl Lagerfeld several times while wearing these boots, and Karl seemed to take a liking to them. He didn't say anything on the spot, but one day in 2014, Pharrell received an invitation to appear in Chanel's short film titled Reincarnation. He happily accepted and subsequently met with Karl in his design studio to discuss what he would wear in the film. This meeting sparked a bond that would evolve into a close friendship, and while I intend to dedicate an entire video just to Karl, you should know for the purposes of this video that he was intensely selective about the people that he'd work with. There was nothing more important to him than his work, and for whatever reason, he trusted Pharrell to carry out his vision. Just to put this into perspective, Pharrell was the first male to ever appear in it.
And I'm gonna say this too, bro. Like, it's just the person he is. He had that head start. He had that head start, like past everybody else because who he is. But at the same time, I feel like some people really don't need to go to school for any of this stuff. They could just get them like a sewing machine, learn how to just sew and learn fabric, and just create. You just create and just do your research on certain people. I just feel like you don't have to go to school for this. You don't have to go to school for I feel like you don't have to go to school for fashion design. You don't have to go to school for graphic design. It's certain things you don't have to go to school for. But only reason why I see why it's good to go is because of the networking part. But if you actually do what you got to do and put your head down and get shit done, you really don't need school. You save yourself hella money. You just got to be around the right people and network around the right people to, have a successful brand. You don't need school for that.
In a handbag campaign for Chanel. He also spearheaded what I believe is Chanel's first and most prominent sneaker collab with the Adidas Chanel Pharrell NMDs. And then, not to get too ahead of ourselves...
Yo, hold up. Let me speak on these two.
...work with. There was nothing more important to him than his work, and for whatever reason, he perspective Chanel. He also spearheaded what I believe is Chanel's first and most prominent sneaker collab with the Adidas Chanel.
I don't have those pairs, but where the hell did I put them? Hold on, let me see if I got them. Hold up. I don't know if I still got them. show y'all something. Hold on. I don't know the other one at, but these right here, these NMDs, like the other ones say human, but these just say race. I wore these so damn hard in the ground, bruh. I wore these super hard. These like my favorite pair of shoes. This one like NMDs was the shit, bruh. These are the best shoes ever. Let's get back into it.
pharrel NMDs. And then, not to get too ahead of ourselves on the timeline here, but in 2019, he was even granted the opportunity to create his own capsule collection titled the Chanel pharrel Collection. Unfortunately, Carl passed away just about a month before this collection debuted, making this the last project that they worked on together. However, Pharrell remains an ambassador for Chanel to this day, and continues to carry on Carl's legacy with his support of the fashion house. So clearly the partnership with Chanel has been a big one, but it may not be the biggest one. You see, in 2014, the same year that he appeared in a short film for Chanel, Pharrell inked a partnership with Adidas that would completely take over the sneaker industry. It started with 10 pairs of Stan Smiths reimagined in his fun, flowery aesthetic. Generally speaking, they were well received, and people were left optimistic about the prospect of this new partnership, but no one could have predicted what was about to come. In 2016, Pharrell and Adidas worked together to reimagine the NMD, short for Nomad, into a quasi-sock shoe called the NMD Human Race.
Yo, those shoes was lit, bro.
This was right when the sock shoe trend was first starting to take off.
Like, what,
while I'm not sure
2014?
the NMD Human Race perfectly falls into that category, it certainly does have the look and feel. One of the things that I like the most about this shoe is that the silhouette is incredibly simple, which makes it the perfect canvas for a wide range of colorways, prints, as well as different graphics. In other words, simplicity is conducive to versatility, and I believe that's why this shoe became so popular. When these first came out, they were one of the most coveted shoes in the sneaker community. Even today, the early colorways resell for upwards of a couple $1,000s, and super exclusive pairs like the Chanel Pharrels can fetch anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000. The partnership between Adidas and Pharrell is still going strong, and the newer colorways of the NMD Human Races are far easier to get your hands on. But along the way, they've introduced a handful of intriguing variations of the original model, as well as some new models. So it could only be a matter of time before they unveil their next big project. Now, between forging partnerships with Chanel and Adidas, 2014 was clearly a big year for Pharrell. But I don't want any of this to overshadow what may have been the single largest fashion statement of his career thus far. And yes, I am of course talking about the hat. To give a bit of background here, I should probably mention that Pharrell released his mega hit Happy in late 2013. To call it a mega hit might even be putting it lightly, because it topped the charts in 23 countries and broke all sorts of records in the process. That said, when the Grammys rolled around in January of 2014, all eyes were on Pharrell, and in turn, all eyes were on the peculiar looking hat that didn't quite seem to fit his head. Almost instantaneously, the hat took the internet by storm, as some proclaimed their love for it, while others turned it into a meme. But there is actually an interesting story behind this hat. If you've seen my video on the history of Vivienne Westwood, you may already know where I'm going with this, but this hat, formerly known as the Buffalo hat, actually released back in the early 80s as part of Vivienne Westwood's Buffalo Girls collection. Depending upon who you ask, some will tell you that this hat was actually designed by her boyfriend at the time, Malcolm McLaren, but whatever the case may be, we know for certain that this became one of Vivienne's most popular products. As far as how Pharrell got his hands on one, well, as the story goes, he simply walked into Vivienne's famous World's End boutique during a trip to London, saw the hat, and immediately knew that he had to have it. There was no way for him to know the frenzy that it would someday cause after an appearance at the Grammys. This was just another example of him experimenting with his personal style. He definitely pushed the boundaries a bit with this one, but it paid off. And I mean that literally. After the Grammys, the fast food chain Arby's approached Pharrell asking to buy the hat because it resembled their logo. They ended up agreeing on a price of $44,000, and all of the money was subsequently donated to charity.
That's dope.
All in all, 2014 was a very busy year for Pharrell, not just in fashion, but also because he released his debut studio album titled Girl That March. If it wasn't already
and ain't gonna lie, that was a pretty good album.
Hopefully everything we just talked about exemplifies just how influential he truly is. All of the biggest names in fashion and music want to work with him, and everything he wears becomes cool by association. The only word that accurately describes him is icon, and in recognition of that, the Council of Fashion Designers of America presented him with the Fashion Icon Award in 2016. Many people look at this award as a crowning achievement, and in a sense it is, because it's celebrating everything that the recipient has become and accomplished during their career. But the concept of a crowning achievement doesn't really exist in the mind of Pharrell Williams. He's always looking towards bigger and better things, so even as he walked on stage that night to be formally recognized as a fashion icon, he still carried the same humble mindset of the kid who more than a decade earlier had walked into Nigo's studio with nothing more than a dream of starting his own brand
I like that design.
and the drive to make it a reality. Although he may have been coming off of a hot streak, Pharrell's string of major moves was far from over. For starters, in 2016, he repurchased the stake in Billionaire Boys Club that he'd sold to Iconics through a joint partnership with Jay-Z. And while we don't know all of the details because the deal was transacted privately, it's safe to assume that he purchased it at a price far lower than what he'd sold it for. You see, Billionaire Boys Club was just one of many brands that Iconics owned, and when some of those brands started performing poorly, the stock price of Iconics plummeted. This opened the door for Pharrell to walk back in and repurchase the brand at a discount, which not only meant that he was once again the sole owner, but that he probably made a decent profit in the process as well. While I wouldn't say that Billionaire Boys Club or ice cream ever really fell off, many plausibly looked at this as the beginning of a resurgence, and in a sense, it has been. These brands will always be looked at as classics, sort of the way that we look at brands like Bape and Supreme, but in part thanks to a new generation of supporters like Don Toliver and Lil Yachty, Billionaire Boys Club and ice cream are still relevant today, and I think they will
And that
continue to
rebrand
be
is
for
crazy.
a long time to come. As of 2021, the skate team, Team Ice Cream, is even back with a new group of members, and that's something that longtime fans were extremely happy to see. BBC and Ice Cream are not the only brands witnessing a resurgence under Pharrell's watch, though, because in 2016, Pharrell also became the owner of the denim company G-Star Raw. Throughout most of his career, even through his different style phases, denim has been a staple in Pharrell's closet, so in that respect, this partnership made sense. But to be honest, I haven't heard much more about it since it was first announced. In the promotional material that was released with the announcement, we can see that Pharrell's intention was to literally reshape the way that we look at and use denim. But as of right now, it's not really clear what his involvement is with the brand. They worked together on a collection called Raw for the Oceans back in 2015 before he officially signed on, but that's about it. It's possible that he's still an owner and is just operating quietly from the sidelines, or perhaps they've separated altogether. But either way, I figured it was worth mentioning. Anyways, moving on, I think it's fair to say that fashion is still at the forefront of Pharrell's mind, but in recent years, we've seen him branch off in some more unexpected directions. For instance, in 2020, he launched his podcast Othertone, which I highly recommend you check out if you haven't already, and he also launched his own skincare line called Human Race. As you may be aware, there's a running joke that Pharrell doesn't age, and for a long time, people have been asking him what the secret is to looking so young. Well, with the launch of Human Race, he was basically saying, "Here, let me show you." Speaking of Human Race, I also want to point out that in recent years, Pharrell has become a major supporter of Human Made. Human Made is the brand that launched just...
See it right there. See it right there. And I got the little blanket right there. I still want that red hoodie though.
And in addition to constantly wearing the brand,
speaking of Human Made, bro, Nigo just dropped some fire shit, like that duck hunt thing he got going on. I already did it before. He did, but it's just homage for the brand anyway. But yeah, what Nigo did with that duck hunting collection, that capsule, fire, bro, fire.
Pharrell has even collabed with Human Made. That alone is all the proof you need to know that Pharrell and Nigo are still extremely close friends and collaborators. Another brand that you may have noticed Pharrell wears quite frequently is Cactus Plant Flea Market, and there's another interesting story there. Cynthia Liu, the founder of Cactus Plant Flea Market, is notoriously private and never makes public appearances, but what most people don't know is that she actually got her start with Billionaire Boys Club. In 2012, she was hired by the brand to work in a PR role, and Pharrell liked her energy so much that he asked her to be his assistant. In an interview with GQ, Pharrel reveals that Cynthia earned the nickname Cactus at a previous job because she had a cactus, and he decided to continue the tradition because it just seemed to suit her. He also talks about how Cynthia started going to flea markets, sourcing vintage pieces, and recreating them for him to wear. The pieces she'd bring to him were unlike anything he'd ever seen before, and he told her that this was undoubtedly what she was meant to be doing. Thus formed the idea of launching her own label, Cactus Plant Flea Market, and the rest is
What?
To my knowledge, Pharrel isn't involved with the label in
That's
any
crazy.
way other than giving his constant support, but it's still cool to know that he played a part in its history. Anyways, that's just about everything